Hello, my name is Nigel Griffiths. I work in the Advanced Technology Centre in the UK, part of IBM Europe. In this Back to PowerBasics movie, we're going to look at how we can set up the virtual Ethernet via the virtual I/O server. The steps involved were described in the Ethernet options movie. Very briefly, we'll go through these here again. First, we'll create a logical partition which is being activated for virtual I/O server, and then we'll install the virtual I/O server itself. Next, we'll add a virtual Ethernet adapter to the virtual I/O server. Then we'll create a shared Ethernet adapter. This will bridge between the physical and virtual networks. Then we'll put the virtual I/O server itself on the network so we can remotely access it. Then when we create our client logical partitions, they'll find a virtual Ethernet adapter and they can use that instead of physical Ethernet adapters. So here are the 5 stages that we'll go through now. So back on the hardware management console, we can see here my bronze machine. I already have my virtual I/O server running in a logical partition, but I'll show you how I actually did that. Click on servers, and here we have our bronze machine. I'm going to click here. We're going to do configuration, logical partition, and instead of using this option here for AIX or Linux for logical partition, we're going to create a VIO server. Very important to get this right. Now let me just move this across here. This is a panel that looks very much like when we create a logical partition. We're going to have to give it a partition name. Let's just call it VIOS. It needs a profile in case we want multiple profiles. So we'll use my default normal. We'll use a shared processor partition. It's good to release CPU cycles from the VIO server if you're not actually using them in the VIO server, for other people to use the CPUs. Let's give it half a CPU with a maximum of 2, and we'll give it up to 2 CPUs in the machine. We'll uncap it so that if this 0.5 of CPU is not enough, it can go and grab other resources. I like to give it at least a gigabyte of space. I'll let it grow to 2 if necessary. We can do a dynamic change to it. Again, like a logical partition, it will need some disks, so we'll select the RAID controller here, and we'll select this C2 adapter in the adapter slot 2. We could give it virtual adapters. I'd rather show you how to add those later on. We go into here of create and add a virtual Ethernet adapter here. We'll take that as a separate item later. We could also use the host Ethernet adapter. This is the network that the VIO server is going to use itself, but we've already got a real physical adapter. Again, we might as well take these options here, do monitoring via the HMC. We get the summary panel up here, and we'll finish that. Okay, all created. Look at the bronze machine, and we have a new VIO server created. So here we have the new logical partition ready for the virtual I/O server software. We need to start it up and we need to install the virtual I/O server. Now this comes on a DVD, so we could put that into the drive and boot off the DVD and install it. Now the VIO server is actually a copy of AIX. It's got a few extra packages and it's set up in a very special way. And on that DVD drive we have a makesysb image of the virtual I/O server. So we can actually pull that off the DVD and put that into a NIM server and do a network install of the virtual I/O server. And that's exactly what I've done, and we have that running in this first logical partition here. No other setup has been done apart from to accept the licenses and set a password on the virtual I/O server itself. Okay, part 2 is to create the virtual Ethernet adapter on the VIO server. So we're going to edit our normal profile. In the virtual adapters. We only have the console virtual ports here, so we're going to create an Ethernet adapter. It's giving us a slot number here, adapter ID. This could be any number, similar to a physical slot in the back of the machine, but a virtual one. This VLAN ID, whatever number we type in here, if other logical partitions have the same VLAN ID, then they're allowed to communicate with each other. Yes, we want this virtual adapter when we start the partition, and this is going to be the connection that's connected the virtual to the physical network. So we'll OK that. And we'll OK that. And we'll close that. Now I've changed the profile of this logical partition, the VIO server partition. I'll need to restart that, or I could make a matching dynamic change to this logical partition, but dynamic changes only work if the logical partition is on the network, so the HMC can talk to it. At the moment, the virtual server isn't on a network. So I've rebooted my VIO server, so it now has that virtual Ethernet adapter. I'm going to log it in here. Note that the user is padmin for the VIO server. We don't use the root user. Okay, now to have a look at my virtual and physical we have a list of our adapters here. We'll see that this is a 2-port Ethernet adapter here, so it's taking up ENT0, ENT1, and then I have my virtual Ethernet adapter here, ENT2. So I want to create my shared Ethernet device to go across those two. Let's quickly clear the screen and we'll type it in now. This command is going to create a shared Ethernet adapter between the physical device here, ENT0, and the virtual device, ENT2. These two options are used if we've got a more complicated setup. So this is just saying that the default adapter is ENT2 and the ID for VLANs will be 42. So now we have a new network device, ENT3, which is a device across the bridge. Now it would be good to put our machine onto the network. The fourth task was to put TCP/IP settings on the virtual I/O server, and we've logged in here. We've got the host name, IP address, the regular things that you need for a network, and to set up your domain name server. Okay, we'll ping a machine just to make sure it's there. Network looks good. The final part is when I'm creating my new logical partition that will be a client of the virtual Ethernet. I've gone through most of the parts here. I've got to virtual adapters. Here I click on Actions, Create Ethernet Adapter. Now, provided I put the same number in here for the VLAN ID, yes, I want it mandatory so that when I activate this partition it is available, and I do not click this here, only the server does that, the VIO server. Provided this number is the same as on the virtual I/O server, then the two logical partitions communicate and my network packets will go out via the VIO server. So just click OK there. And here I see my Ethernet adapter, my virtual Ethernet adapter is also ready to go. So when I start up this client, I'll be able to communicate to the real world via the VIO server and the virtual Ethernet.